Off the Record, On the Charts, a podcast about three of the most important figures in the history of Atlantic Records, our respective fathers, Arif Mardin, Tom Dowd, and Joel Dorn. With our unique and privileged perspectives that our fathers' musical and professional lives were interwoven into our families' lives, it struck me that the three of us needed to get together. Not to present a remedial course in Atlantic's storied history, but to remember our fathers and reiterate their huge contributions to that legacy.
The story that everyone knows is that Jerry came up with the idea of using the phrase natural woman and gave it to Carole King. But that's not actually what happened.
Oh, do tell, Paul
And
Wexler.
this is why we're here.
Then Jerry runs out of the control room into the studio and goes, guys, the big dance now, you got to do the jerk accent. He starts going like this and like this. When you think about Midnight Hour, da da ba da 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 da, got those jerk accents.
The moment that I was entranced by Boogie Woogie, I was 8 years old, and I was at an interracial summer camp, which was very unusual in those days.
The journey into your fathers, I knew the three of you would be diving in, looking for that hidden little treasure of each one of your fathers. They were masters at what they did.
Growing up, like being literally a little kid at Atlantic Studios, late 60s, early 70s, every engineer, my father, but all the engineers that were there, whether it was Jimmy Douglas or it was Tom was gone at a certain point. He wasn't around that much, but it was his mindset. It was his principles, audio principles, level principles, and the bass. They were all Tommy Dowd's children.
All right. So, controller, we can keep that looping without audio, please. Okay, Brian? Keep that looping, please, without audio. Okay, welcome, everybody. Hello. I'm glad to see everyone here. I'm Roy Shamir. I'm the co-chair with Stephen Ward, and on behalf of the AES New York section, I want to give thanks for all of you for joining us, whether you're here today in person or whether you're watching our live stream on Facebook. Today we've prepared a great event for you, spotlighting the incredibly entertaining and informative podcast, Off the Record and On the Charts, produced by our illustrious panel. We are very pleased to be hosted here at Chelsea Studios, which is an absolutely amazing multi-room Dolby certified studio here in New York City. We will be also holding 3 raffles at the end of this event for the people that are in attendance here. And the prizes are very powerful software plugins provided to us by Eventide Audio. For those of us that are interested in the software, you'll be included. And for those of you that have no idea and don't want to, we'll take you off the raffle list to increase the odds. Anyway, we appreciate the continued support of for the Audio Engineering Society by Eventide. Also, please keep an eye on our emails and Facebook portal, where we'll be announcing some more exciting events in the next few months that we are diligently planning. I'd like to introduce everybody now to our moderator. That's Roger Friedman. And I'm going to pass the baton to him and ask him please to take care of introducing our illustrious panels. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Roy.
Well, thank you. Just to tell you who I am, I'm an entertainment journalist. I was at New York Magazine for a long time, and then I started FoxNews.com before everything got crazy. and I have my own website called showbiz411.com. And back in 2002, I made a documentary with D.A. Pennebaker called Only the Strong Survive, which is on streaming services. And it featured a lot of R&B greats from the 60s and 70s. And the reason I did this was, I was telling Joe this before, we used to have something called the Rhythm and Blues Foundation. And actually, Amit gave the original money for it from Ruth Brown. And we used to go to this event mostly in the 90s. And I kept saying, and they would have performances of great people who everyone thought were dead or not around anymore. And I was saying, oh, these people need to be filmed. So we filmed it. And so you can watch that. And it features a lot of Atlantic people. Wilson Pickett and Sam Moore were the main guys. And then we had Mary Wilson from the Supremes, Rufus and Carla Thomas, and some other people from Stax. And Jerry Butler and the Chicago group, and that's how we got the name Only the Strong Survive. So I had the same feeling that you did about your parents. I had about the performers, where I said, we can't let this go unchronicled, and people have to be talking about this. And a great deal of it is because the radio, oldies radio in particular, and even on Sirius, where they have the Smoky Soul Town and all that, but there's regular oldie stations around the country that are playing this music night and day, and people have no idea anymore who the people were, how it happened, you know, and the Atlantic story, I know the Motown story, they're very full of themselves, but the Atlantic story and the Stax story is really the one that I've always been the most interested in, and that's the sound. I can remember when we were making the film, Wilson was doing an album, this was late in his career, and John Tiven produced it. And I walked in, as soon as I heard Wilson's voice, so this is 25 years ago, as soon as I heard Wilson's voice live in the studio, I was like, oh my God, that's the greatest sound in the world, right? And you want to know more about how that sound happened. A lot of people don't know how records get produced, why they get produced, what they contributed to the record. I was very lucky because Phil Ramone was my good friend, and Richard Perry was my very good friend. And of course, the last few years we talked a lot about his records with Carly Simon and Ringo Starr and Harry Nilsson. And people just thought, oh, these singers go into the studio and make the song. But you know, they don't. And unfortunately, I didn't know your father.
Oh.
I
Joel Dorn.
I knew Joel Dorn. I knew who he was.
Sure.
And I discussed him with Bette Midler at one point. Because
How did that go?
she said, oh, that's a guy who made a record for me.
Yeah, that's one way of looking
Right?
at it. Yeah.
So I said, I don't think that's it, actually. So this is Adam Dorn.
Hey, how you doing?
And am I right in saying you're a producer?
Yeah, composer,
Composer,
producer, artist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great bass player.
Yeah,
Bass player. And then we have Joe Martin, whose father was my friend, I'm lucky to say, Arif
Oh.
Martin, who I loved.
Everybody's friend.
Yeah, everybody's friend. He was the nicest person in the world. And Joe is a very, very accomplished producer and composer and musician.
Yes.
And then we have Dana Dowd, who's the reason for everything. Her father was Tommy Dowd, whose name you saw here very large. And he was sort of the mentor for your fathers, wouldn't you say? And, and he also worked on the Manhattan Project, which is really the bomb.
Literally.
And Dana, you were in the wine business?
Yes.
And hotels and
Nightclubs, restaurants.
Hospitality,
wine
they
and
call it.
spirits, yes.
And then you left that as on the top as a success.
Yes.
And got into archiving and recording the history, the very important history of your fathers, and also Jerry Wexler.
Yes.
And Ahmet Erdogan and his brother Nasuhi, who were the founders of Atlantic Records. And they made all the records that we listen to, that everyone loves dancing to at parties. And they don't want to hear the new stuff. They want to hear, you know, Wilson and Sam and Dave and Aretha and Ray Charles and all of that. Plus, Tommy Dowd, a little bit more than your fathers, Tommy Dowd really loved rock and roll and made my favorite record of all time, Layla. So, Derek and the Dominoes, which I want to talk to you about. So, there's a lot to get into here. How did you guys know each other when you were younger?
I knew Joe. I think we've known each other the longest, obviously.
Like around 25, 20 some odd years? At
Yeah,
this point? Yeah.
something like that.
And I can't remember when the first time that we met. You would have been probably really young.
Yeah, I was probably in diapers. No, I mean I'm being serious.
Yeah.
I know Dana. I asked Dana how old she was the other day on the phone. I said I've been that age 3 times already.
We're all respectfully 7 years apart. So I'm the youngest, and then Adam is in the
I'm
middle.
the middle child,
And
the
then-
difficult middle child, elder statesman.
This makes sense.
Were you aware of the other guys from Atlantic? Like, would your
Oh.
father come home and say, "Oh, Arif did this," or "Tommy did this"?
I mean, if you're looking at me, I'd happily answer this.
Yes.
My entire childhood is peppered with Tommy Dowd and Arif Martin stories, and like, so just for context, I'm an age where my father was just out of Atlantic when I was about 6. So I, as a musician and as a actually working musician, I did plenty of work at Atlantic, but never with my father. Like I wasn't old enough to experience those times. But by around the age of 10 or 11, when I was really aware of what my father's earlier history was, Arif Martin and Tom Dowd stories were, constant. And they were still all in touch and still friends. My father was the first of the 3 to leave.
Were you always hearing the word Amit? Like it never ends?
No. And I'm very happy to say what I'm about to say. I always heard the name Neswi. Neswi was who brought my father in, and oddly enough, Joe's father Arif had been working for Neswi, and then my father worked for Neswi, and Arif went on to become Arif. But Neswi, to me, when I think of Atlantic more than anyone, that's the North Star. That's my father's North Star, and someone that he loved. The very last job and thing he ever worked on was a box set honoring the life of Neswi.
Oh, really? I know
like
that.
12 hours before he died. My father. Homage on Neswi.
These people don't know that your father.
That's my father interrupting.
They don't know that your father extraordinarily won back-to-back Grammys.
Yes.
With Roberta Flack.
Yes, he did.
In 1973 and 74, I think.
Yep.
For First Time Ever I Saw Your Face and Killing Me Softly was his song. So how old were you then? Do you know?
I was 3 and 4, respectively. And I knew about it.
Did you?
No.
That's what I wanted to know. When did you know?
No.
When did you know that your father won back-to-back Grammys for Best
By
Record?
the time I was about in 3rd grade, 8 years old,
Uh-huh.
I knew what the Grammys were. My first memory in life is like music. Is hearing the Jackson 5 and dancing. You know what I mean? Like, so music's been like a real mainstay, but I was aware of what a Grammy was because we had 2 of them in my living room.
Yeah,
and people would come over and be like, "Oh, it's Grammy," and I would just be like, hey, "That must mean something," But yeah, by about 3rd grade, but
It's really extraordinary. Did you ever meet Roberta Flack?
I worked with Roberta.
You did?
Yeah.
When did you work with her?
And please talk to my friends. On a record, we're going to get to them.
Let me just say parenthetically, for the 2 of you, the Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway album is like the best album ever.
Oh, yeah.
And You've Got a Friend, their version of it is the best version that's ever been recorded, including Carole King.
It's wonderful. But to quickly answer your question, in 1988, I worked for a producer, and I'm still connected to a producer, an incredible bass player named Marcus Miller. Marcus Miller was my mentor, similar to how Neswi mentored my father. Marcus mentored me, and I worked on a record called Oasis. It was still on the Atlantic label. And what I loved about the experience of working with Roberta then was that I had to hide my identity because Roberta and my father had an interesting relationship. But Marcus would, during the making of that record, would call my father and ask for advice about certain scenarios and what would be the best things to do. Roberta's one of the best ever, but she could have a real difficult moments, and it was really fun to watch my mentor call my dad and say, what do I do, man? I need, like, give me a little help. And I'm like, whoa, this is like Star Wars. This is like Obi-Wan and Yoda. And I get,
Well, I'm interested, also Arif and Tommy.
Yeah.
I'm interested in how they navigated the various personalities. Let's start with Tommy, with Eric Clapton, maybe. Is that a good place to begin?
Sure.
Now, I know from personal stories that, Richard Perry and Ringo Starr did not get along. We're shooting a documentary about Richard now, and Ringo won't do it. He's the only one who won't do it.
Didn't a lot of people not get along with Richard Perry, though, in all fairness?
Everyone got along.
Okay.
But Ringo really felt like Richard took all the credit for the Ringo album.
Wow.
So he's never given, that's like the chip on his shoulder. So tell me about Tommy and Eric.
Well, that relationship started, I guess, officially when Amit gained wind of Cream. And within, 24 hours, he had double stacks of Marshalls at 1841. And he was like, what exactly is happening? And that was sort of the beginning of the British invasion of Atlantic Records,
Right.
as we can call it. And I think that those guys, with all due respect to them, were not in their right minds at the time. And, this is late 60s, and I don't know what transpired on the road, because my father ended up engineering all the Cream albums and Live Cream. He was the live engineer for that. But Eric must have seen something at some point that when he was in a very bad place a couple of years later, he was with Robert Stigwood, and I don't know what had come to be with Delaney and Bonnie and all of that, which brought him to Bobby Whitlock and that relationship. That all of a sudden it was like, I need to go to Miami, I need to wrap my head around something and go to Criteria. But he went to Miami and Criteria because that's where my father was primarily at that point. He trusted him musically at that point. He realized there was something that clicked in whatever was going on in Eric's life, that then over the next couple of years and his ins and outs of sobriety, he kept going back to Criteria, my dad. So Layla, Derek and Domino's Layla, and then again, he didn't have an album for a couple of years, and then 461 Ocean
Well, 461, I remember when I Shot the Sheriff came out, and Eric Clapton went through the roof. I mean, that was really, even though he was already very famous, but that really sent him right through the roof. Did your father talk to you about the making of that at all?
Yeah, of course he talked to me about it. That was a band that was sort of put together where Layla was more of a jam. They needed to just figure out what was going to happen. They needed to go in the studio, rehearse live, and figure out if anything can come of it. And if you look at the Layla box set, the re-release, you'll see there's just full-blown jams. Mm-hmm. And when they were jamming is when Duane Allman called the studio and said, we're going to be down here, you can bring the guys. And I guess there was having a hard time in the studio one night, and my father had it in his head that the Allman Brothers were going to be down the street. So he was like, okay, break time, we're going to go. And he surprised them. He got them in limousines or Winnebagos or whatever they had with them, and they drove down to the Allman Brothers show, and my father walked in with Eric Clapton and stood right in the photo line, like where the photographers would be. And the story goes, Duane Allman looked down and saw Eric Clapton and froze. And Greg and Dickie looked at Duane like, why is Duane freezing? And then they looked and they saw Eric and they were like, oh, he's having a moment. And they actually carried on for him because they know how incredibly proficient and professional Duane was, no matter what, that if he froze, something was up. Right. But that was his hero. And the same could be said. The same could be said for Eric to Duane. They both felt the same about each other. They had a kinship.
Would you say was your father a peacemaker?
Oh, my father was 100% a peacemaker.
Was he a peacemaker at home too, or did he just do it in the studio?
No, my father was a peacemaker.
I mean, was he like a very level-headed?
In just in general, he was very level-headed. He didn't scream. If he raised his voice, you knew something was very wrong. But the crooked finger was definitely a thing.
Yeah.
There was a crooked finger involved. I've inherited it.
Because you can only imagine him in the studio with all these huge personalities at the same time, and how it was like a circus, and how he kept them all in line.
He just had this incredibly even-keeled demeanor about himself, and composed, and sort of read every situation, whether personality-wise or musically, before he took action on anything.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about Arif a little bit. Now everyone loved Arif, and Arif loved everyone. And Joe made a fabulous movie. What's the title of your movie?
The Greatest Years in Town,
The
the
Greatest
Arif Martin story.
And I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's on Apple. You can rent it on Apple.
Yes. We're sort of in between distributors, and there seems to be a little bit of hangover, but we're about to get a new
situation happening.
Well, I watched it the other night because of that for $4, and it was fabulous.
I'll buy you a drink.
But it's a terrific movie, and it does show you how it should have been called just Everyone Loves Arif.
Oh. I don't know if that's a good thing as far as a documentary is concerned.
And he must have had favorite people. I mean, he worked with somebody. One of the things that I learned through your previous podcast also that's so interesting is that you were talking about this in one of the chapters, that these guys were hit with different kinds of music all day long, every day.
Yep.
It wasn't like now somebody goes to make an album, it's that one thing that they're doing, and and they concentrate on it for 6 months. Here you had guys in the studios, your fathers in the studios, encountering jazz, pop, R&B, rock, sort of on it was like a patient coming in to see a doctor.
Yep.
You know, and they're
That's a
like,
great analogy.
who's next? And they would come in and say, let's make this record now. And each one was a quality product.
Yep.
You know, that had a personality and a stamp on it that they left.
You bring up a point. I want to go back to the Motown comment that you made earlier, because
Okay.
Atlantic to me represents the most curated 20th century American label experience, because between Jerry and Ahmet and Neswi, you have everything from the MJQ and John Coltrane and Charles Mingus and Ornette Coleman to Ruth Brown, or Roberta, or Aretha, Bet. Like it covers everything. It's not just one thing, and you're
Right.
100% right. You know.
Well, as a kid, when I was a teenager and all these records were coming out in the early 70s, I didn't really know much about jazz. And Herbie Mann and Les McCann.
There you go.
I
Yes.
bought these records because they were on Atlantic, made by these people. And then you would
Yes.
bring them home and say, well, what is this? This is a pop song. This is something else. And then you'd learn the whole language of it.
Yeah.
That's really what was so interesting. And they were creating the language.
Yep. 100%.
And in that sense, Motown did not do that.
That was
Motown had their product.
They weren't tasked with that. They had their thing was such a. It's magnificent.
Right.
It's just a different thing. You know, they didn't have on this. Atlantic was if the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a record label, in my estimation.
Yeah.
Because you know, my father in particular would make a jazz record with a bagpipes player from Philly named Rufus Harley,
Right.
and then work with he made a record with Dr. John and Kate Smith. I mean, it's yeah. I'm glad
How did that even happen?
Yeah, Kate Smith is not exactly a topical reference. Yeah, go on.
I think that we actually say in one of the episodes, Atlantic Records was like the United Nations of the
Yes.
music industry in respect to the people who worked there. But it was also in respect to the artists.
Yeah.
You know, no offense to Detroit, Michigan. My mom's actually from Detroit. But, you know, you look at Detroit and Motown, it's not like they had train stations and people coming in and out ad nauseum. New York City being such an expensive
Sure.
back door, and always having people here performing at all of these incredible theaters. And even back then, it was a much more accessible place.
Sure.
So the revolving door was a little bit easier, as Motown was sort of pocketed.
I want to ask Joe, what's your favorite Arif Martin record?
Oh no, I can't answer
You
that.
don't want?
Yeah,
No?
there's too many. I mean, yeah, and then also I'd offend friends. But yeah,
What was his
you
favorite
could tell
record?
me. I don't know if he had a favorite record. No,
Was there a group that I mean, I know he liked the Bee Gees.
I mean, the Bee Gees, the
But that
Average
was
White
later.
Band, they're family, like total
Yeah.
blended situation where their children and us, and you know, and the Rascals are family. But you know, Shaka Khan and Bette Midler, I mean, these are all.
I know
people, the
that.
bonds are really deep.
I know you've told this story before, but we should tell the story about Shaka Khan. And I feel for you.
Careful when you say that.
Well, the music story.
Yeah.
I feel for you. I feel for your story.
Oh.
Because it's you know, one of the great introductions of any record. You know, Shaka Khan. And can you tell just quickly how that happened?
That's also an interesting example because you think of Arif Mardin and Tom Dowd, Joel Dorn, George Martin, Quincy Jones as being advocates for the artist, right? And not doing things that the artist would necessarily not want to do. And the I Feel For You situation represents sort of the antithesis of the way Arif kind of approached things, more like for the greater good. So this is what's happening in 1982, 83. They're working on the I Feel For You record, and it wasn't an easy song to put together because Arif really had a vision for it that involved hip hop and rap, and so he brings in Melly Mel from Grandmaster Flash to do this rap.
Can I just say, is this 1978?
No, this is 82.
82?
Yeah.
All right.
83,
Okay.
84. And so he brings in Melly Mel, and my dad always had this idea of Shaka's name is such a Shaka Khan. He always, and also Shaka's stage name, her sister's stage name, Taka Boom, and he used to love Shaka Boom, Shaka Khan.
The drum fills.
Right. It's totally logical, right? And he's open-minded enough to see that as a thing.
Yeah.
So when they started working on I Feel For You, they sampled Melly Mel going Shaka Khan, and my father was on the machine. It was an AMS sampler, and his finger slipped on the button.
Yeah.
And and he went, "Oh, wait a minute." I'm onto something. And Michael O'Reilly, who's here, was there. My father's engineer, dear friend of ours, and so they did it. Shaka Khan became the intro that everybody knows. And then in the film, The Greatest Years in Town, I'm interviewing Shaka after my father had passed, and she said, "When your father played that for me, I was like, gee, Arif, I don't know. I don't know if she said I kind of didn't like that dude saying my name, and then she does my father's voice, and she goes, 'Don't worry, my dear, it will be a hit.'"
And it was.
But it's a very interesting thing, right? She was sort of like, "I don't know about this," and he was like, "For the greater good, trust me, this is going to be good. This is going to work." So it's an interesting contrast to the way that these men usually worked, which was egoless. As George Martin said, we're taking the picture and we're putting a nice frame around it. So, yeah.
Do you have, once I was sitting with, I'm dropping a name, but Aretha Franklin was my good friend.
Yeah.
And we were having lunch, and she said, "Do you have Nile Rodgers' phone number?" And I said, I think I do. She said, "Let's call him. I was supposed to sing Upside Down." I said, "You were?" She goes, "I didn't like it." And then he gave it to Diana Ross.
Wow.
And
And she didn't like it either.
No, they fought. Yeah, that was not a fun session.
But you guys, from your stories, from your parents, from your fathers, do you have stories of songs where they had to be the artist had to be convinced by their father to do it?
Absolutely. Bette Midler.
Yeah.
Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy.
Uh-huh.
She was pissed. She did not like, my father had an idea, and I will say this, unlike Tom and Arif, my father, this is going to be a reference that not everyone will get, but if anyone here is of a certain age and watched Phil Silvers in Sergeant Bilko, my father was very much from the Sergeant Bilko school of causing chaos and General Colonel Holster. He would have an idea, and unlike the Shaka scenario with the sampler, he would just say, "I don't care, we're going to do this." And this is the first album, and he set a path for Bette with the first record that they fought that's why she said, "Oh, he's just a guy that made a record with me."
She actually said that. She goes, "Oh, he's just this guy," and I'm like, I had to say to the people we were with, I was like, "No, he's really famous."
No, not really famous in my house, but in context, signs her and builds the whole concept of her first record that she fights him tooth and nail on, and it's a massive hit. So,
Was it his idea to slow down Do You Want to Dance?
Yes. It was, and on the podcast that folks here listen to it, I say this almost in every episode. My father could not find 2 and 4. My father could not play an instrument. My father was deaf in one ear.
Oh, wow.
My father was everything that a musician but his sense of songs and musicians was impeccable. And he would get into it. He didn't get into it with Roberta. He and Roberta were really cool, but with Bette, she was, "You don't know anything. You're not a musician." There was a lot of fighting. She was better with Arif. She was better for Arif.
I have to say my father worked with that earlier, and no disrespect to Bet, but it was something we were talking about with women and my father. My
Oh.
father apparently chose to, and we've had this
Yeah, yeah.
conversation
We've
later
had it
in
in
his
front of
life,
these
after
people.
like the cream of the crop of Aretha. I think a lot of women in my father's eyes maybe couldn't compare,
Yeah.
and he worked with that a couple of years later, and he passed on a couple of that projects after that. And,
But they all got along with Dusty Springfield,
Oh yeah, yeah.
right?
My
Did they
father
all work
worked
on the
with her.
Dusty album?
No.
Dusty in Memphis?
Say again, sorry?
Dusty in Memphis.
Yeah,
Your father?
yeah.
Your father?
The triumvirate of
all three of them.
Of Jerry. No,
No.
Jerry.
Tommy,
Jerry,
and-
Tommy.
yeah, and Jerry was the prime mover in that situation.
The Dusty Springfield story continues. My father worked with Dusty in later on, closer to just before she passed. They did some sides,
Oh.
and they were really tight. He loved her.
But that album is, I used to talk to
That
Jerry about
record's
that
amazing.
album. That's a landmark album.
Absolutely.
So, can you tell us something about what your father would say about that?
Unfortunately, I don't know too much about that.
Yeah.
The only story that I would recall, and you might know more about this, is that when Tommy went in after she had done some vocals, and he went in and she wasn't there, and they played the tape, and her headphones were so loud, and I think that was part of how she did the sort of sotto voce, like get it very close on the mic and sing sort of. I think that's why she had it. I've read this somewhere. You know, hopefully, I'm not perpetuating false information.
No, but that makes sense. No, that really makes sense. The one thing Paul Wexler brought up in the episode of the podcast,
Right.
where he told some stories, is that she was so paralyzed with fear and insecurity during the making of that record too. She couldn't choose songs. She was so absolutely in awe and fearful of being around the same sphere that Aretha was
Yeah,
in.
they were
And
Aretha's
I
people.
think she really had insecurity, but boy, you can't hear it. You know, it's a magnificent record.
Yeah, it was that production team. It was Jerry Wexler, Reef Martin, Tom Dowd production team, but that was done in Memphis at American Studios.
Right. Dusty in
And-
Memphis.
And the horns were then done a couple of weeks later here at 1841.
Oh, the horns weren't done in Memphis.
No, they were not.
Oh, interesting.
And according to Paul Wexler, the vocals were done up here too,
Uh-huh.
Right.
because she apparently didn't feel very comfortable down there. That, according to Paul Wexler.
Actually, it's surprising. I always think of Memphis or even Muscle Shoals, as the place where a lot of Atlantic and Stax took place, but a lot was recorded in New York.
Yeah.
Sam and Dave were here in New York, and Aretha was here in New York, and they loved working here.
I didn't know Sam and Dave was done in New York.
Yeah, Sam used to take me on little tours on 8th Avenue and say, we could be up there, we'd be doing this. Yeah.
Well, so
Right.
Sam and Dave, the album that my father produced, that is Hold On You're Coming.
Right.
Hold On I'm Coming was done here at 1841.
Yeah.
But the other Sam and Dave albums were done at Stax.
Oh, at Stax with
in Memphis.
Isaac.
It was that particular album.
Yeah.
That was done here at 1841. Yeah.
So when you were growing up, and you see all this music, you can hear all this music in your house. Was there ever? Did you ever say to yourself, "I wonder if I'm going to be a musician"?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did you ever say? Because you're not a musician.
Not outwardly.
No. You're like me. It's in your head, but I'm not a musician either. I come from a family of musicians, but
Right.
I'm not one.
Right.
And were you thinking, I wonder if I'm going to be like that, or how I'm going to be part of this?
Oh no, I play piano and guitar. I
Okay.
just don't play them to anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, I practice. I have very long nails, but it's not something I'm outwardly. It's not something I'm outwardly. I'm not getting on stage and performing like. And these two, like, I'm not even thinking about having this conversation anymore. Let's end this.
Well, how about you, man? I mean, you were.
I
you
mean,
were-
these
yeah,
two
you were in there.
as musicians
Joe?
are incredible. So.
What age did you realize, was this my dad does and I'm in studios and I'm going to do this?
There was definitely a point where it was like astronaut, musician, and at age 10, astronaut lost out, and by the time I was 10, I was like, this is what I want to do.
So Stan is the same age for me.
Yeah.
And my dad was making a record with a group called the Neville Brothers. And Art Neville, who was also the organ player and keyboard player for the Meters, was watching me react to mixes, and I was keeping time. And Art Neville looked at me and he was like, "You're going to be a musician." And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm going to be a football player. I'm going to be the best Jewish tight end ever. And Art Neville was right. And so it's so surreal to be like this artist that my dad worked with. I end up, like loving this, wow, he was right.
So you saw yourself as a utility person then.
Yeah.
Blocking and maybe
catching the bass. Bass is the tight end. I'm a bass player. Bass is the tight end of music. So yeah, I mean, just this notion of like being in studios. Joe and I spent a lot of time as young musicians, even before we were musicians in studios, and you're around, all of the musicians Ralph McDonald and Chuck Rainey and Bernard Purdy and Cornell and Eric Gales, all these guys, like it just gets in you. You don't have a choice. Before you know, I'm like, wow, I'm a good bass player. How'd this happen? And you, man, you.
Yeah, it was whenever I could, I was at the studio, hanging out with my dad and watching sessions. And I remember being there when they cut Until You Come Back to Me.
Were you there when they did that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
So
I loved in your movie where Stevie Wonder says, "I've got a song for you," and Aretha says, "You have to come get it." And she comes, and she's actually rapping on his door, and not hearing her.
Stevie wasn't in the film, but Stevie said to Aretha that I've got this song for you, which turned out to be Until You Come Back to Me. And they sent somebody to Stevie's house to get the cassette. And like nobody's answering the door, and Aretha's like, so we're literally like rapping on your door, tapping on your door. Stevie, where's the tape? We need the song. Yeah, she tells that story in the film. It's funny.
He was the last person to see her.
Oh, really?
I went to see her about a month before she passed.
Yeah.
And then when she was really sick, when it was the end, he went there and sat with her.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
He just loved her.
Just incredible that they never made a record together.
I know.
That always astonished me.
But I got to jump on this whole Joe going to the studio thing, because Joe, like Dana said earlier, is 7 years older than me. So, where did you guys live? Upper West Side?
For the most part, yes.
Okay, so every day after school, Joe could go to the studio. I want to strangle Joe. Because you remember, you hear stories about the Beatles, and all of them lived in the suburbs, but Paul McCartney lived near the studio.
This is
Paul McCartney. This is our Paul McCartney, ladies and gentlemen. When we started the podcast, came up with the idea, Joe and I were having lunch, and we would always just have these 2-hour conversations about stuff exactly like this right now.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, wait a minute. You got to go to the studio every day? That is so unfair, man. I was like, oh,
it wasn't literally every day,
yes,
but
it was.
A lot.
Yeah.
And especially as I got a little older into my teen years, if on vacation and things like that, I was hanging out all the time. And they tolerated me and put up with me, which was lovely. I really grew up there. And nobody called me Joe. It was Joey.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh. Nobody called me Joe.
Now, after all the jazz and the R&B, the Bee Gees in the mid-'70s had no career whatsoever. They disappeared around 72.
Mm.
And then suddenly they came back with Jive Talkin'. How did that come to be?
It wasn't suddenly, because the Bee Gees were being distributed through Atlantic. They made actually an album with Aretha before Main Course.
Oh, they did?
An album called Mr. Natural, which did not do well. But Robin Gibbs said, we were kind of learning each other, kind of feeling each other out. And then the Bee Gees came down to Miami, and the same 461 Ocean Boulevard house. And there was this sort of interesting situation, which I've kind of learned more about since more recently, that Aretha was kind of going back and forth and running a little interference for them while they were kind of getting entrenched in American soul music and R&B, and check this out, check out this record, and maybe write, I like that, and then he'd fly back to New York and do whatever he needed to do here and sort of calm the brass down about what was happening in Miami, and then go back down, and then eventually he said at one point when we had cut Nights on Broadway, we had cut Jive Talkin', that Robert Stigwood and Ahmet Ertegun came down to the studio, and he said, we were in the trenches, we thought we were doing something good, but apparently the reaction from the two executives was, this is you're going to have hits with these are danceable, and that's kind of when everybody was sort of on board that the Bee Gees had reinvented, and obviously the falsetto happened one night at 2 o'clock in the morning on Nights on Broadway.
Right, that's so interesting that was how the falsetto came about.
That happened because the song was completed, the vocals were done, but my father said, can you give me some ad-libs at the end? Maybe can you take it up an octave what you're singing? And Barry said to himself, well, if I sing in full voice, I'll sound like an opera singer, so let me try the falsetto. It wasn't the very first time he ever sang in falsetto, of course, but a certain sound was born in that moment. They all acknowledged that.
And we should just add that then Amit wouldn't let your father do Saturday Night Fever.
Well, that's a longer story, and I'm going to also bring in Dana on that one.
Okay.
But I'll start it. That basically you had the big main course record with Jive Talkin' and Nights on Broadway becoming big hits, Fanny Be Tender, and you had Eric Clapton having big hits with Atlantic, or really RSO Records distributed by Atlantic in America. And at a certain point, Robert Stigwood wanted better terms, and Robert and Amit kind of had it out, couldn't come to an agreement, and this prevented my father, and please continue and add whatever you think is...
and my father,
Yes.
from working with Eric Clapton. So Robert Stigwood organization, that cow that you see on Saturday Night Live and on Grease and all that, it says RSO. That's RSO for anybody who doesn't know the reference. Robert Stigwood organization, who happened to be the Bee Gees manager and Eric Clapton's manager. A lot of you, I'm sure, since you're here, and thank you for being here, have not listened to the Tom Dowd episode that went live at 5 a.m. this morning.
I have. You must listen to it.
When I couldn't sleep. I was like, okay. We talk a lot about it there, but Amit and Robert Stigwood, obviously both businessmen, didn't come to terms, and our fathers weren't allowed to work with two of the most successful artists on the roster.
They were given an ultimatum.
They were given an ultimatum, basically, and yeah, you can hear more about it in the Tom Dowd episode. It's not nothing bad or negative. It's just we talk extensively sort of about it. But my father wasn't allowed to work with Eric Clapton after EC. So they did 2 albums in the 70s,
Right.
independent, and then he wasn't allowed to work with him, and Arif wasn't allowed to work with the Bee Gees.
Did your father work with Clapton again?
Yes.
What was the next one?
Money and Cigarettes.
Okay.
And Arif worked with the Bee Gees later.
And Arif worked with the Bee Gees again, and then there was another change up, and my father and Eric didn't work together, and then they worked together with Phil Collins as co-producer on August in 1987.
Wow.
And we also did the soundtrack for Color of Money, Paul Newman.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to add to that question that you
yeah.
which is that you're talking about one of the savviest music executives ever in Ahmet Ertegun.
Yep.
Why wouldn't he make that deal?
Do you think the songs would have sounded different? Did your father
that's
say?
That's
What did your father say when he heard "Staying Alive"?
You know, it's funny. I didn't know this, and when I interviewed Robin Gibb for the Arif documentary, he said, "Your father heard all the demos for Saturday Night Fever." I was like, "Really? I didn't know that." And he said, "Oh yeah, we were picking his brain and sending him stuff, and I was surprised to me." So I think he must have had an inkling, if that's correct.
But I'm also just gonna say, knowing the two gentlemen who did those albums, which are Carl Richardson and Albie Gluluden, those are also very egoless men
Yes.
Yeah.
who are very kind souls in general, and they came up watching Arif and my father.
Right.
So they were also very respectful and I'm sure humble to the fact that they were coming up under Arif Martin and Tom Dowd, and they're just good human beings.
And Carl Richardson was engineering the Arif tracks, the main course tracks as well. So
Right, and how he had been coming up under my father and also your father when he was at Criteria. So I think it was sort of more of a, we're gonna do what we can because we're standing on the shoulders of Arif Martin on this, which they really were after those songs and
Sure.
you know, and they had a great deal of respect for him, and they're very kind and respectful men, and they're both very musically proficient. So I think that they just sort of took what they had with the talent of the Bee Gees, of the brothers Gibb, and ran with it.
Yeah, totally. Your father.
I would love to hear the Arif Martin version of Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah.
Period.
I do think certain things would have been slightly different.
Sure, it should.
Yeah.
Everything would have been just fine.
How are you going to go wrong with those songs and the Bee Gees?
Exactly.
I wonder if it would have been so disco-y though. I wonder if he,
I think it would have been.
Would have been jazzier. I don't know.
Mm-mm.
Or
No,
more
I think with
strenuous.
the time, there's the funky Turk. I
Yeah.
mean, there's
Yeah.
the saying, Aretha's
Yeah.
the funky Turk.
What is it
the
about-
funky Turk?
I want to ask you, what is it about the turkey thing?
Oh.
What is it? Let's just say Ahmet and Nasuhi were Turkish.
Yep.
Your father was Turkish.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
And they knew each other in
No.
Turkey? No, or they met here.
Met here.
But
Yeah.
now you would not say, oh, Turkey. That's the place where all great R&B comes from. So how is it that these people who are so historically involved in popular music came from Turkey?
They drank a lot of wild turkey. I don't think it has really much to do with Turkey, other than you had these gentlemen who were obsessed with American
Yes.
roots music.
100%. They were, Neswi and Ahmet were so enamored with Black American music that it had to happen. And you have these two, basically, sons of ambassadors and part of the, the highest level of intellect and just government power in Turkey, and they're absolutely in love with the blues. It's gotta win.
But before they made it to the U.S., they were in Switzerland and in France.
Mm-hmm.
So they were able to see
the
some of the
Erdigans were.
Erdigan brothers were in Switzerland and France before they moved here in their early and mid-teens.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
Did Arif-
I mean,
No,
yeah.
Did Arif know about the-
I'm certain of at
Did
least one of
Arif
those
know about
two
the
cultures.
Erdigans before he came to America?
That's a very good question. I don't think so.
Uh-huh.
I don't think so.
Yeah, he knew about Bird
He
and
knew
Dizzy
about Charlie
and
Parker and
Right.
Dizzy and Duke Ellington, and he was a bebop teenager, and he knew about Quincy because
Yeah.
he met Quincy in Turkey. But there was an obsession with American pop culture. Not only my dad, but Ahmet talks about how he wanted to come to America and hear the blues and see cowboys, and they were So I think there was a love of it from a place that coming from people who were outsiders that brought some kind of passion to it as business people.
Yeah.
But he grew up liking Atlantic Records.
My
or
father?
listening to Atlantic Records.
Oh, I don't think so.
No.
Oh no,
okay.
that was my father.
Oh no, I know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. No. I'm just.
My father was getting 78s in
Okay,
Istanbul
okay.
and was a precocious teenager listening to bebop, and then Bartok and Stravinsky, and he was an interesting young man.
Yeah.
Dana, I want to ask you, so your father worked on the Manhattan Project.
He did.
He was a scientist.
My father was 16 years old when he graduated from Stuyvesant High School and was incredibly proficient at math and science, which is what Stuyvesant's known for. And he was recruited as a bottle washer to just test the test tubes. They needed to be cleaned. And when he was 18, he was sent for basic training in Louisiana, and his orders read to be sent right back to the Beacon Physics Laboratory at Columbia University, and it read Manhattan District at the time on the orders. And they said, you're a staff sergeant T3, and this is your pay every week, and now you're in uniform, because people were really suspect to the fact that he wasn't in uniform, but he kept showing up every day at 16 and 17 to Columbia University, knowing what was happening. And they put him as the overnight radiation operator to operate the Geiger counters and read radiation because
As one does.
here
Radiation, MJQ, or
your kid.
And he's like listening to jazz at the same time?
My father played over a dozen instruments.
Right.
And he would listen to absolutely anything. He loved music. My grandmother was a classically trained pianist and opera singer. My grandfather played the piano. He was stage manager and stage set designer here in New York City and helped build.
But he knew Oppenheimer?
I mean, they worked together. Assumably, they were. My father was the man who was overseeing the Geiger counters. It's not like my father was sitting there, knowing that he was creating all these secrets. He wasn't at the level of Oppenheimer. So he was 18, 19. As like everybody else, it was a web of universities working. Nobody knew what they were working towards.
What would he have made of the movie, do you think? of Oppenheimer?
It's Hollywood. That's why we're here, because it's Hollywood gentrification, and unless there's people speaking up like us that do know some of the behind the scenes of that particular time, we're never really going to know the truth. I actually have about 150 pages of correspondence, but they're more correlated to my father. They're all high resolution digitized of that, but it's not the top secret stuff. It's more like, and this is what just happened. Thank you for being a part of it. And if you talk about this, espionage, top secret. And
really?
Oh, yeah. And my father used to carry this very tiny little card in his wallet that was laminated really thick. And I never understood what it was. And I knew he was also a part of the Operation Crossroads, Arthur and Baker, the tests afterwards, because that used to sit on his desk, but he would never talk about it. And in the mid-90s, there was a huge article in the Miami Herald, and it said, government is allowed to talk, anybody who's still alive is allowed to talk about Operation Crossroads. And I looked and I was like, Daddy, isn't that what you worked on? Because I always used to see this little card. And he's like, yeah, but we still don't really talk about it. And it said Bikini Island now open. I was like, I want to go. And curved finger Tom was like, you have to promise me you will never go there. I will talk to you more about this in a couple of years when you understand better, but I know what we did there. I was there.
Did he ever tell you?
Yeah, I mean, he told me, he's like, we destroyed the islands. He was on the Haven, and he was the Geiger counter who was monitoring the radiation on the Haven, and he said he watched the first test, which were the overground tests, and you could just see everything sort of turn brown, and you could feel like an atmospheric change. And then he said a couple of days later they did the underground tests, and he said, I didn't know if I was going to live through that. And with that, this is something I haven't really shared, but Warm Your Heart, which is what I named the episode, are lyrics that he wrote sitting in on the Haven in the middle of the Bikini Islands, never knowing he was going to go into the music business. And when the Drifters one night they didn't have enough song, he had the sheet music. He always used to carry a briefcase with whatever sheet with music he was writing, and he wrote music. He wrote and read music, and he pulled it out and he handed it to Ahmed, and Ahmed looks at Jerry and goes, we'll be right back. And Ahmed and Jerry came back like an hour later, and they had written the actual music to my father's words. So that's part of the reason I named this episode Warm Your Heart.
And then they stole his publishing.
Adam, that's the end of every story. That's the line at the end of every single music story.
Maxine Pinckney, Bill Pinckney's widow, says my father also wrote a couple more of those Drifter songs that others took credit for, and Bill puts it in his book. But that's a story. Yeah. That's a story for another.
Maybe the training with this whole thing made him the perfect record producer and the person to handle big celebrities, big personalities in a recording studio, because he could keep secrets. He could compartmentalize.
He was very good at compartmentalizing, and I think he was just a very incredibly humble man. I think he was a humble man from watching his parents lose everything in the Depression. They were very well-to-do in entertainment, and they lost everything in the Depression. He supported them the rest of their lives the minute that he could. I think that what he saw in the war and what he saw in Bikini Atoll and what he did, I think humbled him to another level. I think then coming back and looking at Columbia University, who told him that he had to, he couldn't get a degree because it was 1947 top secret science, even though he had just helped discover 3 new periodic elements. And I think
they told him he couldn't get a degree?
Correct. He's never received a college degree. My father never received a college degree because it was 1947 top secret science. So they said, you have to do these classes and you'll have an extra 3 years. And my father walked into the first class the first day. He said, let's give it a go. And he looked at the periodic table, and there was 3 elements missing because he had just helped discover.
Were they platinum and gold?
Excellent.
And multi-platinum. And that's when he took a job as an assistant engineer at a recording studio, because he wasn't going to sit in classes that he knew that he could actually teach.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was still really humbling. Like, it was sort of like, I can't talk about this for the next 50 years. And
So I'll work with Aretha Franklin.
Right.
yeah.
It's a good trade.
Sort of staying on this science thing for a minute, I want to talk a little bit about AI and what you guys think of it. Because I've been writing stories on Showbiz 411 the last 3 or 4 weeks about this guy who's down in Greenville, South Carolina, and he's been churning out AI records. He's invented R&B stars. He's invented the songs, the voices, and the videos. And one of them is this guy, Eddie Dalton. He's not a real person. Eddie Dalton.
I know.
Do you know about this?
Yeah.
He has 3 of the top 10 singles on iTunes. He's also invented a couple of women who now they're all in the top 100. He had like a dozen records in the top 100 on iTunes last week. A lot of people, and when I finally found this guy, which was very hard to do, he was very angry, and he said, "I identify everything as AI," and I said, "No, you don't, because there are people on YouTube writing underneath the videos saying, 'This is so wonderful, it reminds me of Wilson Pickett, it reminds me of Johnny Taylor,' it reminds me." What he's doing is he's pouring voices like Sam Moore, Johnny Taylor, Wilson Pickett. He's pouring them into like a paint bucket, spinning them around, and making up a voice. Then he's making up a song. He says, "Well, I write the lyrics," so he writes the lyrics, and then he's got fake soul singers. I find it extremely offensive.
So why? So let's talk about. Let's talk about something else.
No, I can turn this around. I'm happy
Yes.
to actually turn this around. Has anybody here been to tomdoubt.org and looked at the discography that I put together? If you haven't, I'm not offended, but there's an 8,000 field discography on tomdoubt.org.
Wow.
And it's a compilation of everything from AllMusic and 45 Cats and Discogs.com and notes my father left me that I've been working on for 9 years. It all went into an Excel spreadsheet as it was being done. So I would bounce things into Excel spreadsheets as they were confirmed. I sat with Al Schmidt before he passed. He gave me 3 hours of his time at Capitol Records. I had some things to ask him. I threw the yeses into the yes pile. When I got this Excel spreadsheet almost finished, I can always update it now. And I said, okay, I'm going to go live with tomdoubt.org, which has been a process in its own right. I said, how the hell am I going to create a computer program to do a drop-down menu the way that I want it feasibly done? And I went to a friend of mine who actually builds AI websites for people, and I said, give me a clue. The entire drop-down of tomdoubt.org, the entire discography and all of the fields are not computer programmed by a person. I learned AI and did it that way. So I think as a tool,
Well, that's a good tool.
as a tool to enhance something,
Right,
to
but
make something more efficient, it's one thing. But to take away the human aspect of art and creativity, I think it's offensive.
You know, Adam,
I think
You know,
it's more than offensive, actually.
Warner Music
Yeah.
made a deal
With Suno, right?
with Suno.
Yeah,
they
Suno, who
were-
has Mark Andreessen on their board.
Yeah.
These are tech fascists. These are horrible people.
I only learned about Suno really in the last 2 months when this started, because suddenly this has become the thing. And there's much more of it, by the way. If you go through YouTube, there's much more of it than just the guy I found. It's systemic. And people now they're being encouraged to make their own records.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody the other day called me up. They said, I have a friend who's made this record and he wants to use it as a demo and bring it to singers for them to do it. I said, well, who wrote the song? He goes, well, AI wrote the song. I said, well, no singer I know is going to sing that song. So you might as well put it out yourself, because nobody's going to cover it. You know.
I have a feeling, and Joe, jump in 2 seconds.
I was just going to say, don't be so sure that nobody was going to cover it.
I was going to say that too.
Exactly.
There's plenty
Do
of
you think we'll see-
opportunistic people out
Do you
there.
think we'll see real singers covering AI music?
I don't know about that. I know that I look at this and I think about, art and what it takes to make art and what it is from a human.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I live in a world where John Coltrane exists. I live in a world where, you know, Rene Magritte exists.
Right.
All of this, for me, feels like the gist of AI music, unlike what this gentleman is doing in South Carolina, is a focus on the last 25 years of pop music. And it's shit in and shit out. And I understand the use of this for prompts and helping the creative process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are universities making deals with these companies, and I understand the concept of a school saying, we're going to use Suno so these kids that we're training to actually physically play a violin and play a bass have access to these tools, so they're, you know, it's part of the thing. So it's, think about this. Drum machines came into existence in the, you know, 70s and 80s, right? Everyone said, drummers are done. The best drum machine programmers I know are all drummers, and they adapted. That's one thing. But AI and this concept, my prediction is, and I could be totally wrong, in the next 5 years, if I was a 17-year-old, I would learn how to physically do something, because I think there is a bubble that is going to burst with all of this. And it's good to learn what the tools are and who's doing what. But it feels like charlatans.net to me, / you know, P.T. Barnum. Learn how to play a tenor saxophone. Don't ask someone to, you know.
Because the warmth and humanity of playing a tenor saxophone cannot be reproduced by AI. You can tell from this music that I've been writing about that it's, you can tell it's AI, right? As soon as it starts, you say, these are not human beings involved in this.
Yeah,
you know?
Unfortunately, yeah.
And I really hope to God that you're right on that, because, you know, my father used to say volume versus intensity.
Oh, that's interesting, because this is volume.
It doesn't matter how loud it is if you are not emoting a feeling from somebody, whether it's a swinging your hips or a making somebody think, right? And this is a whole concept, whether it's a lyric or a poem or you're playing guitar part. And I say today to that, it's quantity versus quality. And you have to find, through all of this noise that we have out there these days, you have to want to find the quality, because the quantity and the swipe left, swipe right, the TikToks, the this, it's just so much noise that goes back to the volume versus intensity. And we need to get back down to the ground and look at the creative platform and reality and say, this is where we want to be.
Is Russ Titleman here?
Yes, he is.
Where is he?
Hi, Russ Titleman.
Hi, Russ Titleman.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, you know, James Taylor and all these great records, and Roberta Flack, and Aretha and Dusty. I mean, you couldn't...
Donny Hathaway.
Donny Hathaway. Come on. And you couldn't create that through a computer program. It's just, it's not going to happen.
The human circumstance, the beautiful pain and suffering and love in these people's voices and in their instruments. You don't hear that in AI.
Is there anything that you hear on the radio that's new, a new artist where
There's a Cab Calloway single that's coming out that is just the best. I'm the worst person to ask that question. I'm literally waiting. When I meet people that work at Atlantic, I always say, hey, when's the next Ray Charles single coming out? Like, I don't...
Does anybody work at Atlantic anymore?
I don't even know. But everyone that worked there that ever heard me ask that question says that's very funny.
I have to tell you, what's happened at Atlantic Records is a Shonda.
Well, Joe...
We went Shonda!
Joe is
Joe
here,
Paparico.
and he was the head engineer at Atlantic Records until just a couple of months ago, and unfortunately that doesn't exist anymore.
And was very kind to help us in the beginning of this
podcast. He was the first 2 episodes. Him and his team were just
awesome,
amazing. Thank you.
In true Atlantic Studios fashion.
But they did find Hilary Duff.
Yeah.
That was very exciting. One of the worst records ever made. And the new people at Atlantic.
Roger, come out of your shell if you would only come out.
You know, I'm sitting at my desk, people are sending me things.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, we're changing. Everyone in Atlantic is changing. All these young people are coming, young guys. They're all the sons of heads of record companies. The whole thing. We're going to take over. Yeah. And the person they signed is Hillary Duff. Yeah. I mean, this is not like they didn't go to Diana Krall and say, can we do something fabulous with you?
No.
Or Nora Jones, right?
Nope.
He didn't call in a favor to his father for Diana Krall and say, hey, can she jump labels?
No, they went to Hillary Duff.
Yeah. One of the wildest things about doing a podcast about the history of Atlantic is that, at least for me, right? Because my father, of the three fathers, had the shortest tenure at the label. It was just a little under 10 years. How long was Arif there? How?
Oh God.
Like
1963 to 2000.
Right, and Tom, so it's 47 to 78 or
47 to 80.
47, 80. So, but between the three, and I'm not going to speak. I'm going to speak for the three of us. I am going to speak for the three of us. Atlantic Records for me, as soon as these three men weren't there, like, kind of doesn't exist.
Right.
Like, so, and I would do sessions at the studio. Like, I was a studio musician for a brief time, and they would have like Rat and Hootie and the Blowfish, and I'm like, that's not Atlantic. Come on, where was Charles Mingus? Like, that's it. Like, so it always cracked me up. They would be like, oh, Atlantic Record, and I'm like, that's not Atlantic.
No.
That's like someone saw a picture of Atlantic, and that's what it is now.
What did you think of Crosby, Stills and Nash?
That was then. That's
or Led Zeppelin.
That's Atlantic.
It's Atlantic.
They were all the dads were there, and all the ethos was there. Right. Neswe was there. Jerry was there. Ahmet was there. Arif was there. Joel was there. Gene Paul was recording. Jimmy Douglas was there. Mario Medias. The team and that history and that moment, Tunj Aram, like just the whole crew. Bobby Warner, like just the great people. That was a thing. And it ended. I don't know. It just at a certain point it wasn't the same. It became Warner Music Group.
Well, let me ask before I think people want to ask questions. So.
Oh wow.
But before we do that, tell me something about the personality of your father's records. What is it that you hear?
What a great question.
What do you hear in his records that you knew about him, and that you can I can tell with Richard Perry the sound, right? Or Phil Ramone, I know the sound. What's the signature in a Tom Dowd record?
Equalization.
Okay. A little bit more.
We discussed this a little bit in today's episode, actually, that it depends on the era. So I could tell things from the 50s Tom Dowd versus 60s, 70s, or 80s Tom Dowd, because more so Atlantic Records drum pocket. We talk a lot about the drum pocket, and the 60s, anything that Arif and Tom worked on together with or without Jerry. Well, with Aretha, with Dusty Springfield. Yeah. All of those arrangements, all of those horn sections on Aretha Franklin and on Dusty Springfield aren't anything but Arif Mardin and Tom Dowd.
Right.
That's their arrangements. That's their strings. There's a famous photo, and I say it in one of the episodes. It's a Stephen Paley photo where you see the piano and you see Aretha sitting at it, and you see Arif on the left and my father on the right, and there's peanuts and a Diet Coke and maracas. And you see the sheet music, and they both have sheet music and pencils. And you know that those two goons, and I can say that because I love both men with all of my heart, are literally looking at Aretha going like this, going, what's she going to do next? No, make her do this. Let's put this idea in her head.
Well, that's in your film, when they do Ain't No Way.
And that's what these guys are doing, and you could almost in the photo see them laughing and having a good time doing it because they spoke so well together musically. So there's certain sounds from that era, then there's certain sounds in the 70s. So I can tell my father's work more from an era perspective and an artist perspective.
Okay. But your first answer is actually the right answer, though, because it is equalization. Because it's sound.
I know it is, but it is equalization.
Yeah,
yes.
Now, spot on.
With Arif, I'm good friends with Judy Collins.
Sure.
And I've been to a lot of shows with her, even the last year or so, and I've seen the response from the audiences. She's still doing it. And when the Send in the Clowns starts, everything stops.
Yeah.
Like you can hear a pin drop in the room. That recording is so amazing. And that's the Arif signature. You can tell it's a signature.
That's interesting you should say that, because he always gave credit to the great Jonathan Tunick, who was Sondheim's orchestrator. And it was Jonathan Tunick who did the arrangement for that.
No, but it's the sound of it.
Oh, well, interesting. I mean, that was also Phil Ramone on that particular, and they didn't work together a lot, but they worked with Judy Collins together. My father kind of prided himself. He was sort of like, he didn't think he had a sound. I think in the 70s maybe he did a little bit more, because strings and horn arrangements were a bigger part of production then. And for me, when I hear, even if I don't know the record, sometimes I'm like, that sounds like a dad chart. Yeah,
What a great thing to
that's a great
think.
That
I love
definitely
that.
happens.
Yeah.
But sometimes is it the silence also? There's a quiet sometimes in these records.
You know, he would say, and he told this to my mother, he would say, I'm there for the artist, I'm there for the song, but I try to put in 1 bar, 2 bars in every record that's for me and for the initiated. And for people who'll be like, wow, that was cool, and then it's gone, and then you're back to, and he very much, and we've talked about this.
The whisper chorus.
The whisper chorus. Adam coined this term. And very much an influence on me and my work, and your work, I'm sure, as well, where you're trying to get something in there that's really cool, but that isn't distracting from your mission, which is to deliver for the artist and to deliver for the song. So those kinds of things.
You can hear it with Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway.
Yes.
There's a lot of, there's silence, there's breathing, you can feel breathing and dimension in the record, which you don't hear anymore at all on a record.
I mean, for my father, it's very interesting, because there was a lot of records where there was a lot of production, right? And then when Nora happened, she was very clear on what she wanted and how she wanted the record to be. And I was observing Nora Jones, of course. And I was observing it. And what was going on is what I call Uber producing.
Right.
Because he wasn't saying, please play that, or let's try this, or he was actually sort of laying back. And she knew that if he wasn't saying maybe this, maybe that everything was going well. And so it was like this sort of Obi-Wan record production that I'd not actually seen him do before, because he would be much more actively involved. So to me, his sound, in quotes, kind of was whatever it needed to be. For,
Adam?
It's an interesting one for me, because I don't think of my father having a sound. I think, you know, it's funny. My 2 mentors, both deaf in the opposite ear. So I always wanted to get them together to finally mix something in stereo. Yeah, what's that?
One of them being Beethoven?
No, Marcus is deaf in his left ear, and my old man was deaf in his right ear. So, you know, it's like, actually, we couldn't do it in stereo.
Or Van Gogh.
The joy and the love of, because you asked favorite records, and I think for my father, I can think of 3. He made a record with Little Jimmy Scott. All right, Sharon.
Sam Moore loved Little Jimmy Scott.
Yeah, well, he'd probably love this record.
Yeah.
It's a spectacular record that Arif did the strings on.
Okay.
So it's a great example of the 2 of them working together on a Titanic album, and just a beautiful record. And I would say that, and when he worked with the Nevilles, and when he worked with Aaron Neville in particular, he made a 50s album that has subsequently been redone a couple of times. I think Don Was did it once with Aaron, and Keith Richards did it once. They loved this 50s little EP of Mona Lisa and Pledging My Love. It just a beautiful record. I felt like those albums for my father, he loved them so much. It was like he loved them like he loved his kids. It was like, there's a thing about them, and I got to watch them get made, and there was such joy, even as a little kid, there was such, doing this myself, and I know Joe, shares this feeling, when you work on something, and you just know that as it's getting done, it's just great, and you're just in a space that you can't explain to anyone else, but it just works. I know that my father, with these particular records was just probably, I don't want to say the happiest I ever saw him, but anytime we brought up the Little Jimmy Scott record, he would just, he was like 2 inches taller all of a sudden. It was like he really loved, certain things. And there are a ton of other moments, but it's wild. He wasn't an arranger and he wasn't an engineer. So sound was always relied on by Gene Paul or different he needed to put the right people in the right places to get the sound that he was looking for. But these gentlemen, their fathers, the gentlemen that are their fathers, Dana is not a gentleman.
Just a gentle,
they had
a gentle woman.
A gentle woman. They in the concept of a sound, a real literal sound, I think is more apparent in their work than my father's. My father's is all over the map. It's a really crazy, disparate list of artists that he worked with, to have Kate Smith and Leon Redbone and Dr. John and the Nevilles.
Kate Smith, I'll never get over.
Yeah, but then a bebop bagpipe player. My father did a lot of really avant-garde stuff, and so sound isn't a thing. It's more like I just knew how he felt about certain things and what things touched his heart. Little Jimmy Scott.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we, Russ? Do you have a question?
No.
And I laughed in advance because I knew the answer. Yeah.
Would you like to correct us on anything?
No.
Well, I do have something to say though.
Okay.
All right, please.
When I was making
come to a mic.
The Winwood record back in the High Life.
Yeah, this is Russ Titleman, who's made a lot of hit records.
Hi. So we had a song called "My Love Is Leavin'," and I called Arif to do a string chart on it. And he wrote a chart, but we did it with a synthesizer. And Rob Mounsey played the parts, and he had a string line in it that sort of defined the record. It was a beautiful record. Like everything on it was just fantastic. Then there's this string chart that comes along, and he had a line that went da 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 da. And all of a sudden the thing comes alive. And I asked him about the line. He said, "Oh, I stole that from myself. It was on an Aretha Franklin record."
You're all I need to get by.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's actually Aretha's line, I think.
Well, Jerry once told me that cleanup woman, Betty Wright, that the middle of it is Soul Man. He said there was no song there, so I just stuck Soul Man in there.
Wow.
You can't copyright a chord sequence.
Yeah, we were. I don't know. I was with Sam and Jerry, and we were talking about something. And I said, "Does Cleanup Woman sound a little like Soul Man to you?" He goes, "Yeah, because it is."
I was there, Russ, as well that day when you guys were recording that. And
wow.
Did Ahmet come in that day as well and visit?
No.
Oh no! I thought I remembered him coming in and saying something to Arif like, "Write the good shit for him."
I love your Amit impersonation. It's almost as good as my dad's. Yeah, that's so good.
All right, I will tell you that I was at Clive Davis's pre-Grammy dinner.
We almost got through a music thing without Clive Davis being mentioned. Why did you? Oh.
Because Amit sat next to me.
All right.
It was Amit and his two girlfriends. Amit always had two girlfriends.
Yeah.
Not Mika, his wife, but his two girlfriends.
Okay.
And they sat on either side of him. And they're my age. They weren't his age, obviously. Yeah. So I'm talking this one next to me is very pretty, and I'm talking to her at dinner, and all of a sudden I feel this thing like this, and it's the cane.
Yeah.
He goes, "Are you making time with my girlfriend?" I said, "You have two girlfriends and a wife. I'm allowed to talk to this woman." That's my Amit. I used to go to funerals with him. I went to Doris Troy's funeral with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very Harold and Maude of you.
He would call me up when we go to the Abyssinian Baptist Church for a funeral.
Just a random funeral.
Yeah, just somebody he recorded.
Oh, okay.
Somebody he recorded.
I'm sorry.
They would open the New York Times Sunday obituary and say, "Let's go to this funeral."
Pretty much.
Who was the Ruth Gordon in this relationship? I love that.
Valerie Simpson, actually.
Yeah, that's
Dana, thank you for inviting me to do this.
yeah.
It was actually Joe Martin's idea.
Were there questions? Do we?
Let's give a shout out to Joe Martin.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Roger.
Is there anything we didn't hit?
Oh, a million things.
Yeah.
Things. Yeah.
But do folks have questions?
Oh, I see a hand.
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay. Dan Levy, great horn player.
Excuse me, hold on one second. Excuse me.
What's up?
Can you please come up to the mic and ask your question?
Follow the rules.
Dan is such a good horn player that when I saw Bruce Springsteen 10 days ago, there he was on the stage.
Nice. Oh, my buddy Clark used to be on that gig.
Clark Gate.
Yeah, sweet Clark.
was a good friend.
Oh,
Is a good friend.
Is a good friend. Yeah, love Clark.
I have a question. First of all, love the podcast. Bravo.
Thank you, Dan.
I love it. And this is a pretty specific question, and as a horn player, it's sort of a selfish one. The Allman Brothers, 1971, Fillmore. Is there a recording I could hear of the first night when the horns were in?
Oh, really?
For real?
Dana?
Take my numbers. Supposedly there. I mean, it's not something that I would have.
Yeah.
But it's something that may have recently come to light.
It's got to be out there somewhere.
And well, if there is, I think there's talk. We can see if there is something. If I can't get you a copy.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Dan Levine.
All right.
Does everybody know that fabled tale? So as to why. So the reason he
Please come on
asked
up, anyone has questions.
the reason he asked that is that at Fillmore East, when my father arrived, he wasn't supposed to be there to record that album. And when he got there, the remote truck was there, and everything was set up, but he had to redo all of the mics, and all of a sudden, a full horn section was there. And my father will go with anything. But the problem is that they were bleeding all over the recording. So when Dwayne took his first solo, my father said, "Kill the horns. It's destroying everything else that you represent." So they left everything. They took out everything except the harmonica with Tommy Dorsett. And there's supposedly tapes that from that first night and that first set. There is tapes of those horns.
Does Phil Walden Jr. know this?
I don't know the answer to that one.
Right.
But it's irrelevant
Okay.
because Phil had to sell the catalog
Oh, yeah.
when he got in trouble.
All right. Anybody else?
Wow. It's a very shy.
Come on, y'all.
Oh, I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dave Patillo.
Yeah. Hey.
So, okay, my question is this, because I know Joe pretty well, and I know he's got a version of this, but you guys probably all have a version of this, but I know you started very young in the studio with Dad.
Yep.
Okay, I used to work with my dad all the time. What kind of weird jobs? From like, like what job did you get? Because I know you just didn't sit there, and I know he probably gave you something to do. So from like beginning to Big Joe with Dad, from Little Joe to Big Joe, and then each one of you, if you could elaborate on it.
Sure. Nice. That's a fun question, actually. When I was hanging out, and I remember being with Michael O'Reilly when he first came to Atlantic in 1976, I remember helping set up sessions, plugging in cables, setting up ashtrays, because then people still smoked in the studio.
Oh,
Set
yeah.
up ashtrays,
You had to coil a cable.
Had to coil cables, and no elbow wrapping, all that stuff. And then I would be assigned. I would make tape copies sometimes. But the real perk that I had, which drives Adam crazy, is that I was allowed to take safety tapes and mix them.
Oh,
So
Dun
if
dun
there
dun.
was a free room,
How old?
6.
14? No, teenager, not that
Bloody
young.
bullets.
And it was a very entitled, special thing that they would let me do. But I have to say, I never broke a tape. I
Nice.
never broke a, I always, so, and then from then, my father would bring me in to do other things. But the beginning was more like that, helping set up sessions, tape copies, things like that.
I had the unique situation where I never really got jobs or tasks from my father. And by the time I was spending time in the studio with him, I really got to know the musicians when I was young, and they would, you know, in between takes, they would happily let me sit and play the organ or, you know, pick up something. I'll never forget, Richard T. let me sit down at an organ at Atlantic one day, and he just said, "You can play it. Don't touch any of those things. But you can play whatever you want."
The drawbars.
The drawbars.
Yeah.
So he said, just work this pedal, which I couldn't reach. So I would just go like this and then start playing. But my main memory ever from one of my father's sessions as a little kid is in between takes, and I don't know what the record was. I know that Bill Eaton was the arranger on this date because I was playing organ, and he was, you know, we were talking, and then I went into the lounge. And in the lounge, and I can say this now because some folks have passed away, was Ralph McDonald and Richard T. and a pile of cocaine. And this little 6-year-old or 5-year-old boy walked into the lounge, and I saw the following thing. They all looked at me like, and I just was like, I don't know what they're doing, but am I in trouble? And I will tell you what I learned that day. I went back in the room and I said, "Dad, what are they doing in the lounge?" And he just said, "I'll tell you when you're a little older." And I got to be real honest. That look of guilt on their face, I never did cope, because I saw how, just like if they looked at a kid like that, I was just like, wow. Ralph McDonald's one of my favorite musicians ever, but that's the thing I'm most grateful about. Like I got to pass over something abhorrent.
I'm really glad there was a drug story.
Yeah. Well, you brought Clive in, so I had to go drugs. Yeah.
We have to have a drug story.
Yeah, drugs have to happen. But yeah, the drug thing was real. Maybe not on a Reef Martin day.
They had to be more discreet.
Yeah, they weren't. My dad was more about throwing a party, unfortunately. And as a result, in my childhood, I was exposed to things that probably also made me never want to do certain things.
Have you seen the Tom Dowd roster?
Yeah, well, no, I know. Yeah, but I'll tell you what, being around that was horrifying. And
Dana, how did he handle it with Eric Clapton?
I mean,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And
I was about to teach everyone a lesson. Let's go on. No. What was that like? I mean, you know, your dad seemed cool and like not about that.
My father was not about that. My father would try to shield me from it, even though it was unavoidable. I'm very much in the same boat as you are in respect to it's something I never wanted to partake in because of everything that I saw.
Yeah.
Warren Haynes told me a couple of years ago, your father got really mad at us one night because we knew all the kids were back there and we were all smoking, even though we were all smoking joints in the dressing room, and you were like outside the door. And you knew what we were doing, and I go, "You were smoking weed?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "That's what he got angry about?" I mean, Dad, do you really think I was that oblivious of a child that I didn't think I knew what, like, some really not good shit was going down? So, I mean, bless his heart, Dad, bless your heart. I mean, how did he handle it? The best he could. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, I started working in studios for real at around 16, you know, and I spent years in a period of time that was really drug riddled in New York studio scene. I worked at a studio called Steve Rosenthal is about to laugh. Quad Studios, all right, in the mid late 80s was. I used to take. Oh, and this is an AES event, so I can say this, and people will know what I'm talking about. I used to clean the SSL in Studio A at Quad Studios, one channel at a time, and it was brought to you by the Medellin drug cartels. There was so much residue of drugs, and I just was like, I'm the toilet cleaning intern. I clean pot seeds and blow on horrible remix sessions. And yeah, by the time I was in the room with Luther and Marcus and Miles and all that, like, no drugs, none of that stuff. It was great. It was so great to be in a drug-free environment after being around just crazy. It's just ridiculous.
And the funniest lead up to that is the first job I remember ever being given was holding the can that sprayed the air to get the dust out of the... That was the first job I remember ever being given by
we were
my
both
father.
in that unit. What was that, Local 666?
Exactly.
Well,
if I could ask for some clarification. Those of us that are in the audio engineering side of things are well aware of the fact that some engineers really despised equalization. Al Schmidt comes to mind. And I believe Tom Dowd was also in that frame of mind. So if you could clarify for us, Dana, what you said earlier, I think you meant that equalization in the sense of the timbre and the frequency response and the curve that Tom favored, which was definitely bass oriented.
Correct.
So I just want to clarify, or ask you to clarify a little bit what you meant by equalization.
Yes. That's
Let me jump in. Tom Dowd was known for mic selection and mic placement, and EQ as a last resort, and was a master of basically getting exactly the sound that he wanted by mic selection and by mic placement.
right. He made the sound by mics, but he made the sound in the room come through the wires as is without having to use anything else as a tool.
And I think he was employing those techniques into the 80s. I mean, obviously he used EQ, but I think that principle of it has to be this mic, and I'm going to put it here, and this many inches away, and how far away from where's the musician in relationship to the walls in the room, and all of that. And that's what Rowie was.
Yes, I'm sorry for that, and thank you. Yes, he would avoid using anything.
And actually, Gene Paul touches on that in his episode because he's talking about a musician and where their instrument is and like where the mic placement is and like everything else is bullshit. Like if you get that right, because that's you were talking to Gene and he said the magic is, you get the musician from the perspective of where the instrument is to them, and you win.
Yeah, it's in the last 10 minutes of the Gene Paul episode because
episode part 1.
Gene, Killing Me Softly, part 1.
I just wanted to say to Adam
that
I was friends with Rufus Harley since you brought him up twice. I lived in Philly. I knew him very well. We had marathon conversations about his music and the instrument. I have very remote Scottish ancestry, and so I've always been obsessed with the bagpipe since I was a little girl, and so I was looking for him because of...
Can I tell you an interesting thing? Do you know the author James McBride?
No.
By any chance? Unbelievable author. Jazz drummer. He has a book, and I think it's called The Heaven and Earth Grocery.
Yes.
And one of the characters is named Rufus Harley. He named a character after Rufus. That's how much he loves Rufus. Rufus Harley is so unsung, and I love that my father produced his Atlantic records. And one of the wildest things about Rufus, if you guys look up this guy, Rufus Harley, wonderful human being. John Coltrane asked him to be in his band because Coltrane was obsessed with drones and Indian music, and Rufus was the only jazz bagpipe player basically in the world. And Rufus was like, I can't play with John Coltrane. He was like, he was literally like, I think he was intimidated being with Elvin and McCoy and like that band. He wanted Rufus in the band, and I'm just like, Rufus with Train would have been just otherworldly. But I love that you know Rufus Harley and
Yes.
someone brought it. The others. Yeah, thank you.
He used to tell me about marching with the Mummers bands and all of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So, yeah, it was
Oh,
great.
that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Kandia.
Yeah.
Adam, I think I could answer two questions that each of you postulated. When Adam, you were talking about the change that occurred
Yeah.
at Atlantic Records.
Uh-oh.
I was at Atlantic in the late 70s and I saw it starting to happen. And the individual who either to blame or was prized for it was the head of all three major label groups. He was the only person to do that. But, I would say the Doug Morrisification of Atlantic Records was the line that separates the Atlantic that you loved and
Right.
I loved with the Atlantic that came after.
I have to push back on that.
Whoa.
Yeah, I have to push back on that because, there were a lot. My father made a lot of great records at Atlantic in the '80s, including #1 records with Phil Collins, and that was all Doug Morris's doing. So I don't know. I think that might be a little bit of an oversimplification. In all of this sort of romanticizing that we're doing about Atlantic, we're not talking about the fact that music and culture also changed.
Yeah.
So you're not going to have Charles Mingus records and Ray Charles records in that way in 1980 or 1990. It was a different era,
Well, that brings up sort of a philosophical question whether the record labels are responsible for changing the culture of music, or are they responding to the desire of the audience that changes?
Isn't the
culture?
answer yes? Like,
Yeah.
It's a back and forth.
That's such a great Joe answer. Yeah, I love that.
It feeds back and
Can I-
forth.
can
Right?
I-
It can't be one or
It's-
the other.
Yeah. I was going to say one thing about what my father's story about the change of culture was as follows. He had an office, and he had an amazing assistant, receptionist, just right hand, named Kathy. And in my dad's office, which he never went in, he was always in the studio with Rasan or Youssef or whatever. He was always working. He had some plants that he loved. And and you don't know where this is going, but you were right to laugh. And he noticed every once in a while, like once a week, he'd go in this little. My dad was absolute mess of a human. If he had a phone bill from 1958, it would be in a desk somewhere. Like it was a total mess, but he loved these plants. And there was one plant that was thriving, and 3 that were basically dead or dying. And he asked someone in HR or whatever, I don't know the names of these things, why isn't someone watering my plants? Right? And the answer was as follows. One of those plants is a corporate plant, and 3 of them are personal. And we won't water the personal plants. And I think my father left Atlantic within a couple months after that. That's my father in a nutshell.
Joe, the thing I wanted to say that you had asked about, which was the Stigwood break. I'm just thinking about the 10 years I spent with Paul Marshall and all the stories he told me about, creating the joint venture, with Lieber and Stoller, and Atlantic would get to keep everything, which happened with Stax, which was Bang, which nobody had done before. It was a basic legal concept, but record companies were not being run that way or had lawyers who thought that way. And production deals were a unique thing because everybody had staff producers, and Atlantic had a different thing going on. And I just wonder if, it came down, and, they let Ray try, they wouldn't give Ray his masters, so Ray left and kept, went to ABC Paramount and retained his masters. And Amit was sort of he wanted to own the records. He understood that owning the copyrights was the catalog, that was the equity, that was the asset value. I mean, he was a smart businessman. He understood that stuff, and perhaps, Stigwood liked taking his catalog with him when he moved around, and it could have been, it could have been a lot of different things. But it made me think of that because I've seen that battle happen.
I think that's an excellent point, but at the same time, you see what's happening with these 2 acts that are having renaissances.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And one wonders if he actually thought, I've thought about this a lot, like, was he actually thinking, it's kind of a blip for them. We can't expect lightning to strike twice. Maybe you could say that the success of Saturday Night Fever isn't something that you could have planned for. But at the same time, I don't know. I think that he was probably more savvy than that and saw that there was more, gas in the tank is the wrong term, but like more creativity there. For Ahmet Ertegun to have missed out on Saturday Night Fever, I don't know. I think more highly of him than that as a music man. It strikes me as odd, even with the excellent argument that you're making about that, because yes, it was a distribution deal. Atlantic did not own the masters of the Bee Gees. There was licensed to distribute them, and not even in the world, in America. So you have a point. Yeah. You have a point.
I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall for that conversation because to let the distribution go with both Eric Clapton and the Bee Gees in 1975, that's a big WTF.
Hello.
Swing and a miss.
Well, maybe you thought we have Led Zeppelin, so we'll be fine.
And where were they 3 years later?
Yeah, right. So the other thing I wanted to mention was an anecdote that your father told me when I had the privilege of...
Which father?
Arif. Steinsky, who you guys know.
Yeah.
Steinsky had given me a CD that was Crosstalk from Atlantic Studio Sessions, and he labeled it Amit, Nesui, Jerry, and Todd. And I burned a copy for your dad because I thought he would just love to hear this stuff. And it was all just, them in the sessions talking. And when I gave it to him, he laughed and he said, and I'm not going to do an invitation to your dad, but he said, if you ask Tom who made the record, who produced the record, he said he did. If you asked Ahmet who produced the record, he said he did. If you asked Jerry who produced the record, he said he did. And if you asked Nesui who produced the record, he did. So he said, what did you say? I said, I just kept my mouth quiet. And that was his father, who was just, amazing. And then, Dana, the last thing I wanted to say was that you talked about how your dad actually dealt with the issue of artists, in the first episode when you talked about the Allmans at the Fillmore, and you said that it was brilliant. I didn't know the story that after the shows, so that he could contain them and make sure they were going to play well the next night. He brought them into the studio so they could listen to the playback, as opposed to having maybe too much fun in New York. And,
this was brilliant because in the episode I actually said to you, what a brilliant move on your dad's part.
So he didn't just stand back and say, "Well, you guys are going to do it." He was very proactive.
He was incredibly proactive, particularly with that lot. Dwayne, listen, none of that lot. They all did their things, but when it came to my father speaking to them about music, they all listened, always. And when my father went that first night and said, "Kill the horns, they're bleeding in, it's we're losing," Dwayne said, if my father then said, "Hey, let's go back to the studio and listen to what you had to do the next night to make it better," and Dwayne said, "That's what we're doing," the rest of the guys would be like, "That's what we're doing," because Dwayne was the band leader. So he was very proactive. He was always coming up with workable solutions, yes.
Well, the contrast to the great stories about the Who getting arrested after playing the Fillmore because Keith Moon did crazy stuff, and other bands doing, having fun in New York. Led Zeppelin talking about when they opened for B.B. King at the Schaefer Music Festival, they didn't think they played as well as they could have because they were A&R of B.B. King, but they had too much fun in New York the night before, and on and on.
Well, I'm not going to say which band, but there is something in the memoir that will come out that an entire band was put in my father's police custody at one point on 2 separate occasions during the recording of an album.
Not Spinal Tap.
And this is not Spinal Tap. I'm just going to leave it there.
It's a good cliffhanger.
Well, that went to 11. Please, anybody, any more questions? Feel free to ask. We still have some time.
Gigi, no question.
And also,
no, we got one.
From the panelists to the moderator, if there's something that the panelists would like covered, please raise that in the...
I'm sure there's something.
Obviously, if you all listen to the podcast, which is amazing, you'll gain a lot of information and knowledge if we couldn't cover tonight. But just within the scope of that, feel free to chime anything else in. But first, Randy's going to ask a question.
It's a question for Adam. I got to work with your father towards the later part of his life, I did a lot of DVD projects with him. And it was kind of a new thing for him.
Yeah.
And talking to him, we had a 5-1 room. We had a 5-1 room. So
he had a 1-1 head.
Yes, exactly. This is what I'm bringing up because there's been a lot of business discussion, a lot of interesting stories around that. But since this is an AES show, I wanted to talk a little bit about the ear, the QC, the finalization project. One of the things your father said was, "Oh, well, this is how I do it because I'm deaf in one ear." We would show him the DVD, but it was in the 5-1 room.
Yeah.
He would go out saying, "Oh, this is looking great." He would open the door and then listen with the one ear how it mixed out of the room.
Wow, yeah.
So after that, all our engineers
was he smoking a joint?
he did not do that in the studio.
Okay,
he did it in the hallway.
He was behaved. All right.
Yes.
So you were saying though, but
so if you can talk a little more about that, because both your mentors, Marcus and your father, were both how they approached the survival mechanism of, and then also your father told me about how he did the Bette Midler record. And everybody was loving it at the party until he told them that it was a mono mix.
Yeah.
And then they flipped out.
Yeah.
And it's like, how, and he's like, well, hey, mono sounds great. Yeah. So.
Mono is, by the way, my best friend on earth is a guy named Charlie Hunter. If you know who Charlie Hunter is, great musician. We both hear out of both ears, but if you get us in a room and we have a chance to talk about records, they're all mono records that we love. We are mono guys. And that's why I always talk about Cab Calloway and Basie from the late 30s. And, my father, more so than Marcus, would always talk about the fact that, hey, you can only work with what you have. And he knew, when something hit him a certain way, and he couldn't tell you anything about frequencies, he couldn't tell you anything about compression or reverb or any kind of technical aspect of anything with a mix, but he would sit there. We had this, I still have it, I love this thing, a boombox that he would A-B everything on. Everything would get like a final listen on this boombox, and it had a mono button. And he would just hit that button, smoke a joint, and it didn't matter if it was high volume or low volume. When it felt right, he knew it was right. And I have to say, after years of I have 2 ears and I'm still learning how to mix, I think mixing is one of the roughest things in the world to do. I have nothing but respect for engineers that really, really learn how to do it. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Especially in these days where everyone thinks they're a mixer. I just was always in awe of my father, knowing that something sounded right, not knowing why. But he would, Gene Paul or whoever the people were, they'd be, he's right. He got it. He would have notes on things, and they'd be like, how the hell are you hearing this way? And he's like, because I don't know. That's my thought on that mix. Can you adjust this? And he was right. He was usually right. It's just like a gut thing, like a heart thing. If it moved him, it was ready to go, And he was right, So 2 ears, 1 ear, whatever.
Thanks for talking about the process. I mean, I've got 2 Grammy nominations in 5-1, and it's like, to me, it's like one of those deals. It's sort of like, I love mono.
Yeah.
The guy that owns
everything.
Deals with Atmos and deals with 5-1, mono still really delivers.
It tells you so much. It's so important. Yeah. And Marcus cracks me up because Marcus would always just be like, sounds good to me. Like the mix was just like whatever. He didn't ever worry about it was the opposite. Like he would just pick, I trust that it sounds good. You guys got it. It's not my area of expertise. And he was lucky. He has always worked with great engineers.
Well, thank you for talking about it.
Yeah, man, my pleasure.
I mean, even separate from that, my father and Tom, all of, any engineer worth their salt, mono compatibility is a huge thing. Sure, you're mixing in stereo or 5.1 is another story, but it had to sound good in mono. To this day, that there's like a ring around my mono button in the studio, because it's like and
Yeah.
Arif was always concerned, because how is it going to sound on the radio? How is it going to sound on somebody's car system that was often mono in those days? So that's still applicable to all of the AES people watching online, especially to the students. Mono compatibility is a very important thing.
Yeah.
Joe, did your dad ever see you play and give you any comments or
Oh, sure. Yeah. He was super supportive. And when we would work together, I mean, the input was always, even if when it was critical, it was always hyper constructive, and he was always really supportive. But we had the opportunity, I had the privilege of, working on many records with him and arranging things for him and programming things for him and sometimes playing. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Okay, anybody else? Angela, any questions from Facebook?
Angela!
None so far.
Great
job, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, going once on the questions? All right, thank you everybody for coming out.
Thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you, everybody.
Supporting us and supporting this project.
Absolutely listen to the podcast, you're gonna love it if you haven't already. And we're going to do the raffle, so just tell me your name and I'll cross you off, or
Do you have a
stay.
Chevy Malibu? That's what I want.
No, we're raffling plugins.
Rowie, before you do that, thank you to everybody for coming. Thank you to Rowie and to everybody at AES and State Wars. Thank you to State Wars, thank you, and Chelsea Studios. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I learned so much tonight.
Likewise, thank you, Adam. Thank you, Dana. Thank you all. Thank you. Yeah.
Amazing.
Roger, can I get you a drink?